Well, let me go to the chat. Let me go to chat. This record is on.
And we'll be going live in 1 second.
Okay, you got it? Okay.
Okay, guys, we'll be broadcasting in 1 minute and I will let you know when we're live.
Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. I'd like to introduce our president,
of the Macon, Georgia Links chapter, our president, Sylvia McGee.
Good evening, and I too welcome you. I'm Sylvia McGee, and I serve as president of the Macon, Georgia chapter of the Links Incorporated. The Links is an international service organization of women that is founded upon the tenets of friendship and service. Through our 5 program facets, services to youth, the arts, national trends and services, international trends and services, and health and human services, we seek to enrich our local communities and improve the quality of life for those we serve. The month of October is designated as Breast Cancer Awareness. We are participating in the observance through our Links in Pink initiative. There is a lot to learn and a lot to act upon. Breast cancer is the most commonly diagnosed cancer in women. Breast cancer is also the second leading cause of cancer deaths. African American women are 40% more likely to die of breast cancer than our white peers. These statistics make education, early screening, and detection critical. The journey of breast cancer is full of obstacles, and they're full of challenges, and it's a struggle. But most challenges are easier in life to endure when we have family, friends, partners, church members, and co-workers to support us. Knowing that we are supported can make the difference in whether we fight on or falter. This evening, we will hear a conversation from the caregiver's perspective. Caregiving is probably the ultimate role of showing love and support, and saying that we all have the potential to be a caregiver. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this evening's conversation, Andrea Cordy. Andrea is a member of the Macon, Georgia chapter of the Links Incorporated, and she serves as chair for our Links in Pink initiative. Andrea has demonstrated that she is a warrior in the fight against breast cancer. Her story is one of resilience in the face of overcoming one obstacle only to face another. And still she rises. She is ideally suited to lead this conversation. I'd like to express my appreciation to the moderator, to the panelists, and to the committee members who have worked so hard on this event and on our Links in Pink initiative. Andrea, now I hand the baton to you.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening and welcome to A Caregiver's Perspective, a conversation with caregivers of breast cancer patients. As mentioned, I am Andrea Cordy. I'm a 5-year breast cancer survivor, a Macon, Georgia Links member, and the chair of the Links in Pink initiative. This is an important topic because in 2019, 319,000 families were impacted by breast cancer in the US. As mentioned earlier, African American women are diagnosed at approximately the same rate as our Caucasian counterparts. However, African American women face 40% higher mortality rates and are more likely to be diagnosed at a young age. Nonetheless, none of those breast cancer patients could fight the battle without their caregivers. However, we seldom discuss the experience of a caregiver. Today, we will take the time to hear the perspectives of individuals who have been in this role. Please let me have a moment to introduce our panel. First, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Starlick Brown, originally from Musella, Georgia, and currently resides in Warner Robins, Georgia. She's an active and committed member of Bibb Mount Zion Baptist Church, where she serves as deaconess, trustee, culinary ministry member. She is the board chairperson for Prevailing Woman Ministries and Crawford County Family Connection Collaborative. She is a life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she served in the capacity of the caretaker for her sister-in-law and her sister-in-love. Next, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Shonda Cheney, a Macon native. She's an accounting manager for Stafford Builders and Consultants, Inc., owner of Penn's Bookkeeping and 3J's Jewelry. She is an active and committed member of Bibb Mount Zion Baptist Church and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She's been the team captain for American Cancer Society's Relay for Life for 10 years. She will be sharing about her role as the caregiver to her mother. Next, we have Mrs. Valeria Cray, originally from Baxley, Georgia, and currently resides in Lizella, Georgia. She's a retired educator who taught for 18 years, then worked in education administration for 12 years. She retired from Bibb County School District as the Director of Federal Programs. She's a member of the Middle Georgia State University Foundation Board, and she also volunteers with the Department of Juvenile Justice as a Juvenile Review Panel member. She is an author of a book by the title Following a Feather Trail. It is a collection of her original poetry. She will be sharing about her role as caretaker to her daughter. Mr. Sean Stafford, native of Jacksonville, Florida. He relocated to Macon, Georgia in 1987 to accept employment as a project manager with Harmon Masonry and Construction. After a 12-year tenure with Harmon, he founded Stafford Builders and Consultants, Inc., where he is employed and looks forward to retirement. He's also a member of Bibb Mount Zion Baptist Church, and he will be sharing about his role as the caretaker to his former wife, who sadly passed away. So we will begin our panel discussion with a few questions that were previously submitted. However, we would like to accept questions from our audience. To do so, please submit your questions in the chat box. You can submit your questions to everyone so that they're visible to everyone, but in the event you would like to submit it privately, you can submit it to Samantha Murphree. That's Samantha and the last name, Murfree. So we'll go ahead and get started with our panel. If you all wouldn't mind, begin by telling us about your role as a caregiver, and particularly, like, when was it and how long did you operate in that role? If we could start with Ms. Starlet Brown.
Thank you, Audria. Good evening, everyone. As stated, I'm Starla Brown, and my role as a caregiver for breast cancer patients started in 2013. My sister-in-law, Tony, was diagnosed in October of 2013 with stage 2 breast cancer. We underwent a number of treatments for about a year, and her cancer went into remission in 2014. In 2016, her cancer returned and she was diagnosed as stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. And we lost her to that battle in November of 2016.
I'm sorry for your loss. If we may move on to Mrs. Shonda Cheney.
My time as a caregiver began in 1994. I was getting ready to become a freshman in college. And so I ended up, with God, I ended up attending Fort Valley State University. So I was able to still go to school and commute and become a caregiver for my mother, who was diagnosed with, I don't remember the stage, because I didn't really, at that time when she was diagnosed, of course, parents don't bog you down much, because I mean, I'm getting ready to enter college. So I didn't know what stage she was diagnosed at that moment, but I do know it was my freshman year in college. So my first year of college at my own choice was not, a conversation I had with my father. I chose to commute and come back and forth home to help him care for her, because I knew, of course, he had a business that he had to run. So that began my journey as a caregiver, and I was her caregiver for 10 years.
Thank you. Mrs. Cray?
Good evening. I was a caregiver for our moderator, Andrea Cordy, and it started in November of 2015 and through probably May of 2016 through chemotherapy, radiation, and 3 surgeries. And then again in 2017 and 2018 with reconstruction surgery and a wound that didn't heal, which meant a year of wound care. So we have gone from November 2015 until actually August of this year, when there was another issue with the wound, which required a surgery. And my role was mostly driver. And then I was a note taker at all the appointments. And I was an advocate handling insurance claims and negotiation. And I learned to clean and pack a wound. I provided updates to the family and friends. I was a housekeeper, a walk-in partner, and a coordinator for home health. So all those roles as the caregiver.
And Mr. Stafford? Thank you, Mrs. Gray.
My name is Sean Stafford. My journey began also in 1994. My late wife, which was Shonda's mother, I can never forget that summer morning that she came to me with some concerns of a lump that she had discovered in her breast. And because of a history in the family of breast cancer, she had a sister that had also been diagnosed earlier with breast cancer. We immediately attended call our physician and went to visit with our doctor. And he decided that it needed to be removed and biopsied. And within a few weeks, we received that news that it was breast cancer and that she was at a stage 3. That's when our journey began. Throughout that, naturally, we had the chemo, we had the radiation. The disease went into remission after about 2 years, 2.5 to 3 years. And things were pretty smooth for the next 3 or 4 years. And it eventually came back around the 8th year, and it came back very aggressively. And that's when the struggle really began. But fortunately, I had co-supporters. I was fortunate enough to marry into a family that your pain was everybody's pain and your joy was everybody's joy. So I was surrounded by other members of the family, including Shonda, who assisted me because I tried to work and also be a caregiver at the same time. And even at times be a punching bag so she could relieve some of the pressures that she was undergoing. But this battle went on for 10 years, and unfortunately we lost her in 2004. And of course, there's always been a thing that I think about Breast Cancer Week awareness, but I was happy to be a part of her life, and I was happy to be a caregiver.
Thank you. So I'm going to open this up to the entire panel. What changes did you have to make in your life to be able to step into that role as a caregiver?
I will start. Andrea lived in the Atlanta area and I lived in Macon. So in January of 2016, I pretty much moved to Atlanta, and I stayed there until July of 2016. Then she had another series of surgeries in 2017. So I moved, and that was when we had the wound issue. So I moved back up there and pretty much stayed for another 6 to 8 months.
So I'll answer. Fortunately, God had blessed our family. My brother and I were neighbors. And so from my house to his house was about a 3-minute walk. And also in 2012, I had retired from my career at civil service. So I was retired and had all my retirement plans laid out. But God had a plan, and I truly feel like it was in his plan and a part of my purpose to be able to be there and to be available to serve as a caregiver for her, as well as being a caregiver to the family, because at the time that she was diagnosed, the oldest daughter was a freshman at Tuskegee, and the youngest daughter was just entering middle school. So at home, it was my sister-in-law, my brother, and the youngest daughter. And so as far as adjustments, there wasn't really any major adjustments that I had to make other than reprioritizing, my time as it related to some of the community service or volunteer activities that I had committed to doing. I had to basically relax some of that, and actually, that situation became a priority for me. And as I walked through that process with them, it was important, I felt, that as we had doctor visits, to have consistency, to go and attend the doctor visits with her and my brother. In that moment that you're getting different diagnoses, I think it's so important to have someone to just sit back and be in the corner taking notes. And so it was a privilege, actually, to kind of walk through that plan of caregiving with them.
Thank you. Mr. Stafford, what?
Well, I would say I was blessed to have a job that my schedule could be flexible. I've always been known to be one that was dedicated to my work. I would work long hours into the night. I mean, it was just I guess I would consider myself more of a workaholic. It was just something that I did. And I had to adjust that. I had to back off some of my late hours. I had to adjust my schedule daily because of doctor visits, chemotherapy treatments, and depending on how she would take that treatment, sometime I would have to spend more time at home until some of the effects of the treatment would wear off. I had to learn to be patient. Probably one of the areas in my life or chapters in my life that really taught me patience, that you have to, learn to give up yourself and give in, and so that others can have a part of your life. I was also fortunate and blessed to have a daughter, Shonda, and I'll have to continue to call her name because we were a great team. And I was grateful that she could have gone to any school that she wanted to, but she opted to go to Fort Valley so that she could be close by and be there to be available to help and assist me in caring for her mother. So I was grateful for that. So I had a lot of support, but I did have to make many adjustments of my own to just kind of let my schedule flow with her as opposed to flowing with me.
Thank you. Shonda, I think you've already alluded to some changes you had to make, but could you elaborate?
Yes, and they weren't hard changes, I guess I could say. I did choose to go to Fort Valley State. I made my school schedule. It was one of, you go out your first year of college, you're excited, new friends, parties, hanging out, that kind of thing you look forward to when you leave school. And I chose to, it's one of those things, really, my first year of college was really, I can't really say, I'm not gonna say I didn't have friends and didn't know anybody, but my schedule was 8 o'clock. I remember it's my first class. I was done 11:30, 12 o'clock, headed back home down 75 to take care of my mom. And I didn't think twice about it. I didn't feel like, you know, my life was taken away from me because I chose to do that. That was my choice. And so I just became, you know, I had just literally just put in my mind, okay, this is what I have to do. And so the only adjustment I would say is, you know, my first year of college, I can say, you know, wasn't a year of me getting to know individuals. I just went to school, had those I went to class with, and I came home. And that was just my routine. Like my father said, you know, I would used to come home. And I do remember when I think the first time she took her first round of chemo coming home, it made her sick. And so, you know, I got to see that aspect of it. And really, that really was if anything, that's the only change I experienced was just, you know, the fact that, you know, was just school. I just made my schedule according to the way I needed it so I could be home with her the rest of the evening because I knew my father was working. And I just want to make sure I filled in that gap from the time when he got home.
We have a question about, I guess the question I want to ask is, did you feel ill-equipped to serve in that role? And, you know, did you get any training from anybody about how to actually do this?
I'll start. No, actually. It was just something, I guess, you know, I guess like I figured it out, you know, I just, you know, by asking questions of my mother or, you know, like she would say certain things and I'd say, okay, well, tell me this. But there was no meeting with nurses or doctors, except for when they left the doctor's office and they tell, you know, this is what you need to do, X, Y, Z. My mother ended up having a mastectomy. And so, you know, we had to tend to that for, you know, when she came home. But that was just based off with the, you know, the doctors, when you leave, they tell you, give you your instructions of what you need to do to take care of the person or that. But other than that, really, no, I just kind of like, it was almost kind of like self-learn just by watching and hearing, and also doing some reading and asking questions. Like my dad mentioned, she had a sister who had, who we lost to breast cancer. So of course, talking to, you know, my aunts and my family back in Florida, so, you know that things could be different, but, you know, certain things could help if we had questions about anything.
Thank you.
So
Oh, go ahead, Starlight. That's great. Perfect.
no, I was just going to address as far as any official training, like Shonda, no, there was no formalized training per se as a caregiver. Coming into prior to Tony's diagnosis in 2013, my late husband, I had been a caregiver to him. He passed away in 2009 from brain cancer. And so I had been his caregiver in that role from 2005 to 2009. So there was things that I brought from that experience that certainly assisted me in being able to help assist my brother and his family and my sister-in-law. But I will say also, from having had that prior experience, I also had learned of things that, you know, as a caregiver or things as of having to assist him as a patient. I learned other things that were needed as a caregiver and also as the family supporting. So I think from that perspective, I was able to further assist, you know, my brother and the children, because I also had that firsthand knowledge of the emotional toll that you go through as you're watching your loved one go through these things as well. So I kind of had a dual perspective, that perspective, you know, as the spouse as well as the caregiver.
Thank you. Does anybody else have something they want to add to that topic?
You know, I would say that I didn't think that I was qualified, but at the same time, I basically made myself a self-made partner with my doctor, or her doctor rather. I would always ask the doctor, what do I need to do? You know, I'd always ask questions when we'd never leave his office without me asking, what do I need to do? And I would write it down and I would make sure that I did whatever the doctor said I needed to do in whatever way he said I needed to do it. So I felt confident every time I left the doctor's office that I can handle this. And it gave me confidence that I would follow his instructions, and even the chemotherapist, same with them. I would always ask, what do I need to do? Because I knew I was not qualified, but I felt confident that I could do it and that it was my task and I was gonna do it.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Cray, you had something you wanted to add?
Well, my husband and I had helped care for my stepson from 2013 to 2015. So I had an idea of what was involved in caring for someone with a serious illness. But we had a mantra, Andrea and I, and we started the day saying, God will give us what we need for this day. So this is all we're going to worry about is this day. And like Mr. Stafford said, when we went to the doctor, we'd say, our job is to stay positive and do what the doctor tells us. And that's what we're going to do. But there was one doctor who gave us some information, a tip that really helped. It was a wound care doctor. And she introduced a concept that she called dumping in. And she drew 4 circles. And the patient was at the inner circle. The caregiver was at the next outside circle. The caregiver support was at the next outer circle. And then the outer circle was everybody else. And she said, always dump out, never dump in. So if Andrea was having a bad day, she got to dump whatever she needed to dump. And I would, if I had it needed to dump, it had to be dumped to the outside, never into her. That when you're dumping in, always feed and encourage that inner circle. And that helped us. And even in talking to some of our friends and family who would come and say, say things that they meant to be helpful, but were not necessarily helpful, would say, we're using the concept of dumping in, dumping out. So if this is something you need to process, we're going to ask you to process that out, because we're holding together here and we can't help process other family members' emotions. That helped me a lot. And Andrea would sometimes say something, if I would say something, she said, Mom, you're dumping in. And that was helpful in managing some of the emotions.
Thank you. We're getting feedback in the chat that is an appreciated nugget. So I think many of us will be taking dumping in and dumping out home with us. We got a few more questions in the chat box. Thank you. Please continue to submit them. These are awesome. So what do you remember as one of the most touching times you witnessed with your loved ones that battled breast cancer? I think we'll start where we ended. Ms. Cray?
It was when, after a chemo treatment, you were collapsed in the shower from weakness, and you saw something on my face and said to me, Mom, don't be scared. God's got this. I'm going to be okay. And that just brought me a calmness, the realization that what we were saying, that God would give us what we needed for that day. And I think that was the only incident where the impact of what was happening really hit me.
Mm.
Okay. Starlick, I don't remember the order we went and I apologize.
That's fine. As I was thinking, as I was listening to Ms. Cray, when I think about as far as the most touching, I think the thing that touched me, a couple of things actually touched me. But I think the one that was probably the most emotional for me was when Tony's cancer came out of remission, and she had to break the news to the children that the cancer was back. And I remember on that particular day, we were actually bringing the Deja home from college for the summer. And And it was the reaction, you know, of the children, of both of them, in terms of, you know, wow, we thought we had beat it. But then the perseverance and the determination that she had to, was like, no, we're going to tell them, I'm going to tell them. She delivered the news to them. And then throughout the whole process of when she was initially diagnosed, she was working towards her master's degree. And probably about a week after the diagnosis, she was graduating. And so I think that was one of the most touching things with me, was that the determination and the perseverance, and that example that she backed up everything that she shared with her girls through her actions. Was, regardless of what's going on, we're not going to give up. We're still going to work towards our goals. And so I think for me, that was probably the most touching thing, was when she actually marched and received her degree, and just that example of determination that is forever embedded in those girls, in their minds, that they had that example there from their mom. So it was a culminating moment, but it was something that took place over several years, just seeing her in action and just seeing her being determined not to quit and not to give up.
Oh, that's amazing. Shonda, if you wouldn't mind.
I have so many, but it takes you to know my mother. But I do have two. One would be was her attitude with cancer, to the point of when she passed. People, when they found out I lost my mother, their words were, "I never knew she was sick," because she never wore it. Never wore it. Even when but people who knew her knew when she wasn't feeling well. They could see you know somebody. I mean, but she was strong. I mean, as many instances I saw, where she was just a strong woman, and she probably had her moments at home in privacy, but when she was in the public, you didn't know. And like I say, until the day when she passed, when people would just say to me, "I never knew your mom was sick," I said, because she didn't wear it. And she's one of the individuals. And then the second thing I will say this, I remember when at first we had our mother-daughter talks a lot of times, and she shared with me the first time. First, she said she was scared, and I didn't have an answer. We just sat quiet at that moment, and it was probably like later on, I guess something, I guess she had her time and her moment with the Lord, and then she came back and she told me, she said, "Shonda, I never forget. We were sitting in the room, and it was right before I was working on my master's at this time." And we was in, matter of fact, probably like the last real conversation I had with her. And she said to me, she said, "I'm ready, daughter. I'm ready to go home." She said, "I'm not scared anymore." And that was it. And it really, at that point, I felt good, better than I had ever felt, because when she told me she was scared, that hurt me, because I didn't have anything to say about that fear. And when she came back and said what she said to me, and now I knew she was fine, I was fine. And I never forget my response. I said, "Well, that's all well and good, Mom." I said, "But you can't leave here until the Lord say so." And then that was it. So those are me, and that's just two of them. We always had those conversations. But if I had to think, those are two moments, like I say, showed her strength during that time when she dealt with what she dealt with in remission. It's coming back in remission, back and forth. And doctor saying, at this point, there's nothing else you can try. But she still was that strong giant, and she lived it until the day she left us. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Stafford.
Well, if I had to come up with a moment that was the most touching, I really have a couple of three that I could put right in there together. But the first one was when we actually visited the doctor, and he biopsied her and said that she was in the third stage of breast cancer. I guess I couldn't help but ask the doctor, because it was new to me. And I said, "Doc, what does that mean?" And so he walked me over in a corner, because she was there with us. And he said, she will probably be with you another 18 months to 2 years. And that just really troubled me. It was hurtful, it was scary. And I never mentioned that to Shonda or any of the kids until after she passed, what the doctor had said to me. I didn't tell them that. But the most one, I guess the one that I like the most is during her entire sickness, every morning, she would get up and she would go to her computer and she would send out a prayer to everyone she knew. I mean, she sent prayers all over the country to people that she knew. So much so that when she passed, my son created a book called Paulette's Prayer. And he put every prayer that she sent him over a period of 10 years in that book. And most of the family have a copy of that book as we speak. And I thought that, like Shauna said, she was very brave and she was more concerned about others than she was about herself. And then, of course, after she passed, we went up in the attic where she would go visit the attic several times. Like when we leave home, she'd go up in the attic and sit at a desk, a little school desk that I had put up there at one time on a piece of plywood. She would go up and sit in that desk. And I believe Shonda found this prayer that she had written to God for her family. Not for her, but for her family. And when we discovered that prayer, that was after she had passed. That was really the most touching moment to me about her illness.
That is really special. I'm sure your family cherishes those prayers. Oh, that's amazing. Well, it's hard to move on from that, but we must. We got a couple of more questions in the chat box. And I want to go with, some of you are familiar with the Macon area. Did any of you participate in support groups or find communities of support aligned with breast cancer?
The only group that we found was, I forgot the name of the organization, but they provided house cleaning services.
That would be,
but it was
cleaning for a reason.
Okay. And that was really helpful. Not only that, but we became friends with the lady who came and she would pray with us. There was one lady at Gwinnett Medical who is, I think it's a Beyond the Ribbon.
So Bobby Minnick.
Yes.
She has Beyond the Ribbon, which is a nonprofit, but her support group is called Circle of Friends, and they have a Facebook page.
Yes, that was helpful. But other than that, I found being in a different town a little challenging. And I depended a lot on my support group back here in Macon.
Okay. Did anybody else participate in any sort of support groups?
For us, one of the organizations that reached out and provided assistance to us was United in Pink. And, they offered some meal services, also some, devotional journals and different cookbooks and things of that nature to kind of help with food preparation that was helpful for cancer patients, to kind of help build the immunity system, things of that nature. So they were very, very helpful organization. And then there was another young lady, actually was a teenager, out at the Cancer Specialist Center. And there were several days throughout the, when we would go out for chemo treatments, that she would come out and just deliver, care packages that contain journals or, a prayer card or devotion. But it was one of the teenagers, and that was very helpful as well.
Thank you. Our next question is, how did you prepare yourself mentally for the challenge of taking care of a loved one? And also, what types of self-care did you participate in while doing such a challenging job? Mr. Stafford, would you mind going?
Would you repeat that, please?
Certainly. How did you mentally prepare yourself to do something so challenging as to care for a loved one? And then also, what types of things did you do for self-care, the things you did to take care of yourself in that process?
Well, you know, I didn't have much of a problem preparing to take on that task. Kind of went back to my marriage vows that was my task to support her in sickness and in health. And so I just felt that it was my job to do so. It did affect me mentally to begin with, not the caring for her as much as dealing with the fact that we have this illness that has come into our home. That was the one that I had to struggle with, is, you know, and not knowing a whole lot about cancer, it being a first timer, automatically saw it as a death sentence. So I had to prepare myself to deal with that. But as far as taking care of her, I felt real confident that that was my job and that I was going to do it, whatever was required. Now, as far as me, I think I'm tough, I guess, and I just felt like, you know, I could handle it. I don't think I needed much attention. I've never really been one that relied on others. I've just kind of let the chips fall as they may. And then I had a lot of support. I keep calling Shonda's name because she don't realize, I don't believe, and I don't know if I ever really expressed it to her, how much help she was. And that's where a lot of my confidence came from, knowing that I had someone to back me up if I should fall short in any way. So I feel I was very prepared, and I feel like I had my self-care would come from Shonda. She would always ask me how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, am I okay? And so she handled that side of it, and then, of course, I handled of mom.
Well, on that note, Shonda, how did you mentally prepare, and what types of self-care did you participate in?
I'm about like my dad said, she was my mother. So it really wasn't nothing. I mean, if I had to say anything mentally, it was, you know, how can I just make sure I take care of her and make sure she's fine. And I guess, but you know, self-care, I had support. I had my dad. I have some wonderful cousins. We're like sister cousins, what we call ourselves. That, you know, one lived in Atlanta. She always came to visit. So I had outlets. When, you know, if I needed something, you know, my aunts would come down and tend to their sisters. So I really didn't have to seek self-care. It was just kind of, you know, I just come from her siblings, and all we just come from a loving family who, like my dad say, you know, if you're hurting, they're hurting. So that helped me out a whole lot, and just gave me that time if I needed a moment to get away, because my aunts would be in town, I could just go do something. My cousin would come down and visit, just have someone to talk to. But again, it was my mother, so it really wasn't nothing meant to prepare for, to say, okay, this is my mom, this is my task and my job, and I'm just going to do it and do it well.
Understand that. Miss Starlet Brown.
Yeah, I have to echo those same sentiments. It was basically, you know, this is family, this is what love does. And so the preparation there, it wasn't a preparation, if you will. It was, there was a need in the family. And like I said, God had aligned things at that particular time. I wasn't working, I was available. The proximity, as far as where I lived, it was easy for me to come in and out, to be that backup assistance for the family. And so, you know, when dealing with my own emotions about how I felt about her and going, you know, with what she was having to go through, that was something that I did away from them, because Mother Cray said it best: the dumping out versus dumping in. It was always a situation where, if there was something that bothered me, or if I felt like I needed to express outward, or if I felt like I, you know, was in that moment of weakness, or feeling overly emotional, then, you know, I would take it out, you know, because there was I also have a biological sister, so she was available. And then just other friends that was not necessarily associated with the family that could be an outlet as well. But there wasn't a preparation to get ready to do this. It's just what you do.
Ms. Cray. Thank you, Scott.
I think early on when I went up to take care of what I call Andrea the first time, I walked, and that was part of my self-care was walking. And a song came to me that we used to sing when she was a toddler. You are my sunshine and my little sunshine. You make me happy when times are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. And when I was walking that day, it was revealed to me that that was a prayer. That years before she became ill, I was singing a prayer. And my job at that point was to help her get through that so that the sunshine was not taken away. And another thing is Andrea has a wonderful network of friends. And so anything we needed, it was there. It was just a matter of organizing it. So I set up a calendar, like a Google Calendar, and I would plug in, we need meals on Thursday, and somebody would respond, meals. Or I have to go to Macon, can you go to chemo with her? So I had a wonderful support system. And then I journaled, and that was another form of self-care. Then kind of like this pandemic, looking for the good side of it. We sat in bed a lot and watched marathons and just laughed. So I found joy in that. And every time we would do it, I would think, this is a wonderful memory here. So just looking at it from that perspective really helped me.
I think the person who submitted that question is wondering if you would have done anything differently with respect to taking care of yourself and your feelings now that you have come to the other side. Is there something you wish you'd done differently? Or are you satisfied with the way you took care of yourself?
I'm satisfied. I can also say during that time with my mother, the things I saw with her, my walk with Christ changed. And during that time with that happening, I think that's what gave me my peace. So it was one of those things where that's at the moment of my journey, my closest, I mean, I saved and all of that. I really became closer just with the things that I witnessed with my mother at that moment. And I think that's just really what gave me a peace, and just having those conversations with her, because she knew the Lord and she loved the Lord, and she served in ministry whole heart. She gave it her all, even during that time. And so I think that's just really, so if I had anything to know, I would not, as there's nothing I looked at. As a matter of fact, I'm glad the way it did happen, because I'm like, I don't know if the walk would have been that way at that moment, not sure. But just the things that I witnessed and saw just with her and dealing with her, and just things that, you know, when God showed himself to me at certain moments when I needed him to, that was a growing point for me with my Christianity. So I look back and it was more of a blessing for me. But again, God knows.
Okay. Mr. Stafford, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would say, I've always said, in order to continue to grow is never be satisfied with your progress. And, so I feel like I did a really great job taking care of my wife. But when I look back, I think about some of the things that I could have done. I think you can always look back and see where you could have done more. I won't say done better, but done more. But I also believe that as long as you leave these situations that are above your pay grade, which it is, in the hands of God, everything's going to be all right. And I never knew until after we were into her illness about 7 or 8 years, how I could be in a position, not in a position, but circumstances caused me to leave a really good paying job. And I left that job not knowing what my next move would be. I left that job really fearful of what would happen because we were going through this illness, and doctor bills and medications were at an all-time high. And a job is what you need to take care of them. And within a couple of weeks, Stafford Builders was formed. And not only was, it was a great move and something that I think God had led me into doing, it put me in a position to work from home, which was not popular at that time. And I was able to get up in the morning and my job would be right there at the house. So I could be there with her all day. And this was during her latter years when things were really progressing and getting worse. And had I not been in a position that I was in, as far as having left that job and started Stafford, I would not have been in a position to do what I was able to do as far as being her caregiver. So I've always let my faith kind of direct that traffic. And because of that, I believe is the reason why the results were as great as they were and as satisfying as they were.
I agree. We have, just for the sake of time, I want to make sure we get to everyone's question. So this time, if you'll just kind of go like that, if you'd really like to answer. We have a question of, what do each of you wish you had known during the journey that would have been helpful, that you know now that you didn't know then? Anybody?
I would like to answer that question this way. Several years prior to my wife being diagnosed with breast cancer, she complained about, not complained, but she would say, I think I feel a lump in my breast. Oh no, I take that back. I'm hurting in my chest. And this went on for several years, and I didn't force her to go seek a doctor's opinion, and she didn't go. And when we did finally go, we found out she had breast cancer, and it was stage 3. I would say to anyone, if you in that situation, do seek help immediately. Don't wait, and don't take anything for granted. To move on it immediately. If I could, I feel like that was where I may have failed by not forcing her to go seek some advice from a doctor. It may not have been that, but it very well could have been.
And I want to add to that, even if you don't feel anything, just go get checked, because Andrea's occurred from like a normal mammogram 1 year to a really aggressive form of cancer 12 months later. And had she not gotten checked, the outcome may not have been as good.
Is there anything about caregiving for a breast cancer patient in particular that you wish you had known from the beginning? Something that made it maybe easier for the patient or easier for you?
I think the mental health side of it was not something that I had considered, that going through the battle creates a form of PTSD for the patient. Like, you're so focused on fighting that when you kind of get toward the end of it, you've not processed all those feelings and all those things that took place. And it's kind of like a crash, and something has to happen with those feelings. So along the way, get mental help, get psychological support to help process those feelings.
This next question is, first of all, the author is giving Mr. Stafford, we want to say thank you for your attendance. They said 3 out of 4 caregivers are women. Glad to have a male on the panel. So thank you. But their question is, how can well-meaning people, and we know what that means, not necessarily in the immediate circle, but want to help, how can they be of good help to a caregiver? What are some of the ways that you use some of those folks who are not on the inner circle to help carry the burden? Anybody?
Now that calendar really helped because I sent it out to anybody that said, how can I help? I told them that I did a calendar and we put in meals, we put in rides, we put in anything we thought we needed, we put it in. And if you could help in any way, just respond to that. It also helped me manage the calls and the emails, like I'll give a weekly update on how we're doing and what our needs are for this coming week.
Anyone else? We actually got a question about, there were times when you wouldn't be able to be there for the person. How did you relinquish for the patient who you cared for intimately? How did you relinquish that to others when you had to be away?
I would say this, like I joined with my mom when I'm here, sitting here listening, actually talking. This is really my first time talking publicly about it, about it besides talking whatever. We were truly blessed, even to the point where at the end with my mother. Now, mother, when she's very particular about things. So when it got to that point, right before she passed, she shortly prior to that, she had met Eileen Strauss. They didn't know each other for years and years, but they knew each other. And I never forget, it was getting to the point where, she had to have some stuff done that was going to just take somebody to take care of her during the day. As far as, her organs kind of slowing down or shutting down. And so I asked her, my mother was before she, to the point where I could ask her because I knew how she was. And I remember asking her, I said, Mom, we need to let someone come in and help us with you for a second for some things. I said, would you be okay if I had already had Miss Eileen in mind, because I knew I think Eileen was caring for a dear friend of hers that she would go travel out the state to go see. And I think it is Eileen, I think she was retired. And I said, would you mind if Miss Eileen came in and, helped us? And with a quick yes is what she said. So I did reach out, but I asked my mom because I wanted her comfortable. And I'm glad I asked her at that moment. And she, without a hesitation, without fight, she told me yes. And so at that point, we made contact with Miss Eileen and we talked to her, and she took it from there and helped us take care of her to the end. I just reached out.
Well, with my sister-in-law, Tony, of course, there was myself, her mother, my sister, and then she had a very close circle of about 4 or 5 friends that were very, very close, and they were just, on the ready. So, so basically, when the immediate family, when there was a need that couldn't be met there, then we could call in on that inner circle of friends that she had, and we were able to basically take care of her needs that way. Again, we had a lot of support, and those individuals that were all there were all very supportive and on board with taking care of her needs and what was in her best interest.
Okay. Do we have anyone else who'd like to add anything before we move on?
Well, you spoke about a well-meaning person, and I know oftentimes we can be ill and get very private and don't want people around or don't want certain people to come help. But I think that comes natural with people that are going through a sickness, and oftentimes it comes natural even with the caregiver not wanting to place that burden, if you will, on someone else. So a well-meaning person, I think, would be a great idea to just maybe be watchful and very mindful and just try to find a way in. Oftentimes, it's not that you're not wanted; it's that the individuals don't want to place a burden, so to speak, on you. And so you just have to kind of look at them really close. If you know them well enough, you probably can tell where they're short. I mean, if it's something as simple as making a run on an error, something as simple as coming by the house and sitting for an hour so someone else can go, so the caregiver can be relieved to go run errands or that kind of thing. And of course, naturally, the individual that's going through the illness have to approve of it, like Sean is saying with Miss Eileen. But I think sometimes you just have to not force yourself, but be aggressive if you really want to help, you just have to find a way in, because oftentimes you're not being invited, not because you're not wanted, just don't want to place that burden on you. And that's not the way you see it, but that's sometimes the way the caregiver and the patient might see it.
Agreed. I mean, I remember there were times where we didn't know what we needed, so we didn't know how to ask for it. Sometimes people just had to anticipate our needs.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions left, and I'd like for us to have everyone respond to these. The first one is, Shonda alluded to it. We're going to use that as a segue, that you've never really spoken publicly about this before. Do you find that your experience isn't often one that is shared? Have you ever really had the opportunity to speak this mindfully about what your experience was?
I find myself, what I can say, every time I've ran across individuals who are dealing with a loved one that has cancer, and they're going through that process, that I already know, usually what that, what it means. I find myself talking, and I've done this recently within the last couple of years with just some of my church members. When, they'll finally, may talk to me or say something to me as it relates to, their loved one. And I would just share some things about what I dealt with my mother. Certain things that they say they would do this, or and like I said, they're doing that point outward, they would get frustrated or certain things about, as it relates to the one they're caring for. And so I would share and just give them from my perspective and say what I've learned. And I would say, like, one I did learn about, like I said, you need a punching bag because they're frustrated. Things have happened. It's not that they're trying to be mean. They just have a lot going on there to this point. It's like, it's just it's frustration. And I'm like, so don't take it personal. So I've had to share things because I learned that, it's not personal. I had to change and say, look, they're going through something. And so I find myself, I would share with individual when they come to me, but I've never, like I say, I've spoken in a panel or talked, in an open forum as it relates to, the things that I experienced. And I guess, and it may be something that's not done a lot. I'm not sure. Unless somebody just come to you and just have a conversation with you because they know that you experience, the same thing they're experiencing. But all of my conversations, I have talked about it, but it was on an individualized basis where someone was dealing with it and they may have asked me a question and then it just carries into a conversation, and I find myself being the one they would call when certain things took place.
Well, thank you, because that kind of validates for us why we're doing this, and that you all are a critical part of the breast cancer process, of the journey. Like I said, 320,000 families a year are impacted. So our audience, prayerfully, they never find themselves in your shoes, but it's very possible that they could. Anyone else had the opportunity to speak publicly about or think this mindfully about the process they went through?
I have not. I've not had a public forum for it. And I do think it's very much needed because there is no guidebook for the caregiver, and you're just kind of figuring it out. If not so much as to give it, tell them how to do it, but just have a listening ear, or a network of listening ears would be helpful.
Well, I definitely think having a platform similar to this is important. I've not publicly shared my own personal experiences. I have been involved with some of our sorority activities that are geared to having a caregiver panel or caregiver resources. So having that information put out there is certainly very relevant, very needed. And then the other thing I think is similar to what Shonda shared, is to be available, as individuals tap into you personally, to be available to share, to encourage, even if you don't have a list of full resources, but just to be that encouraging listening ear, because sometimes individuals just need to be able to vent, let me release, and then I can get back to what I need to do.
Mr. Stafford, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I too have never actually gone public for reasons other than what we're doing here tonight. And I don't have a reason for it other than just hadn't had an opportunity to. But individually, I have spoken with many men in particular that have gone through or are going through the same thing that we've gone through. And I find that it's really helpful. I think forums like this kind of put it out there prior to. I mean, oftentimes when I'm speaking to someone, they're going through it. But it would be nice to know prior to, like we're doing now, being able to share this information with those that have not gone through it and hopefully won't ever go through it. But if so, they would be better prepared to approach it by us sharing our experiences with them publicly.
Thank you. I completely agree. When I have one more thing, my question would be, and it's from the audience, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is currently serving as a caregiver, what would that be? And Mr. Stafford, if we could begin with you.
My advice would be, first of all, to remain in prayer, stay connected with the Lord and with the Lord God, and allow Him to direct you. I think that's the best and foremost approach, but also find time and remain patient and be prepared to be a punching bag. I mean, sometimes they're angry, not at you, but just angry about what's going on in their life, and they need someone to bounce it off of, and that's what you're there for them to lay it on you. And you're there to take the load off of them. So if you're going to take it off of them, you got to receive it. So, but I think staying in prayer, I would say my faith directs all of my decisions. I won't say most. Sometimes I fall short, but I try to allow my faith to direct my decisions. But I would say continue to pray for yourself and for your loved one, and everything should be okay.
Thank you. Starlight.
So I'm thinking definitely keeping God first, keeping that prayer life strong. The next thing I would say is being available and being present in that journey, in the moment, being in the moment. I think one of the things that was most rewarding to me as a caregiver was the availability piece. There were many days sometimes after treatments, but during the daytime when the kids were in school, my brother's still at work. We had a lot of opportunity just to talk. We would spend many afternoons on the back deck, just sitting in the sun, and being available, not being caught up into something else or distracted by other things, but just being available. What do you want to talk about today? Or what's on your mind? And so I think to anyone that is a caregiver, if you have that opportunity where you have those a long time, just sit back and just listen and receive what it is that individual is dealing with, not necessarily, having to try to provide a solution or provide an answer, but just giving them that freedom to express whatever it is they're feeling, whether it's a disappointment, whether it's fear, whether it's, these are things that I dreamed about, these are things that I hoped for, these are things that I'm concerned about, that I'm going to miss, milestones in my children's life. So that availability piece, I found, and not in the moment did I find that, but after the transition piece, I realized exactly how meaningful that was to me. And then I also realized that it had to have meaning for her as well, to be able to have that space, to be able to express those things. And so that's what I would share. definitely prayer, and then just being available, truly being available and not distracted.
Thank you. Shonda.
If I had to share anything, I would say you be that protector. And when I say protector, be from anything. I never forget a time. Me and my brother were 3 years apart. So at the time, and he was when she was diagnosed, he was in high school, then he went off to college. So he was kind of like hit and miss because I commuted. So I saw my mother go through the transition. I saw the things her body went through mentally. I saw physical changes and all of that. My brother, when he went off to college, he would just come home for the holidays, or come home and visit. So, he was in and out. So he missed a lot of the things that I saw that were the not so good moments. And then she always bounced back. She always would go in remission. She's back, she's back mom. So that's what he saw. And I never forget, he came home one time and she asked him for something. And I heard what she asked for, and she did ask for that. So when he brought it back, she told him she did not ask for that. And it was almost like there's going to be an argument about what she said and what he said. To the point that she got agitated and irritated. So I had to look at him and tell him, like, back off. And I had to, I said, and he looking like it was more like his feelings were hurt, because he was the baby boy. It's my mom. Look, she's angry, and so I remember, we got that settled, and then I had to sit down and I talked to him, and I had to explain to him, what was going on, because he missed some of the, he missed those parts. He didn't understand that, because he always knew too, when mom cancer came back, but she would always bounce back. And so that's all he saw, and that's all he knew. So I had to, be that person and say, look, this is what's going on. You're going to have this, it's going to be frustrating here. And he was like, but I know what she asked for, but this is what she said. We're going to just ride with it. Okay. I'm going to fix it. But he wasn't being argumentative, but I could tell he was hurting. He was hurt because it hurt his feelings. And then I could tell, she was frustrated because she's like, this is what I said I wanted. She was talking about it. So in that instance, I was her protector, and I was his protector. Like, look, this is how this is going to go. And so just remember to be their protector, and spend time. Like you say, spend time, listen, and let them talk. Even make time, and don't feel like, okay, she's told me this or they told me this before. Let them tell you over and over again until they do the conversation. Because at the end of the day, when you can't get that conversation back, and you'll think about that. And this is one thing I've always shared with people, and it relates to my mother. When I talk about my faith, when she passed, I can tell them, I say, and I tell it with joy. And I know they're looking like, well, how can you say that, share this? Your mother is passing. But, God knows us so well. And with my mother, she was very family oriented. And she loved me, my brother, and my dad. She was family oriented. That was her. So I remember when the night of her passing, when she had went into that point, and we knew it. And thank God I had an auntie who was a nurse's nightmare, but she happened to be there that night. And she said, your mother is calling for y'all. She was in the room with her. And sure enough, we went in there. And I'm just thinking, had my auntie had not been there, we may have missed her pass. But my aunt was in that room, and she was one that would watch you sleep all day long. That was her. And so we got in there, and it was me and my father. And so, she wouldn't, like I said, and because I knew my mother, I was protecting her. I knew what she wanted, and she wouldn't leave us. Me and my dad was talking to her, telling her it was okay, we were fine. Well, Walter was not there. This time he was home with his wife. He was married. And I said, Dad, she's not going to go nowhere because her baby isn't here. So I called him and I said, hey, I need you to get here. I think we're losing mom. And he got there, I think, in like 2 minutes, and we live about 2 minutes away. So he did. He came in there. And he kissed her on her forehead. And he told her, he was a minister. My brother's a minister. And he was like, Mom, job well done. And this is the point when I tell you my faith really, just went to a whole other level. I saw Christ. And it's like when that happened at that moment, it's like a light lit up in the room. I could see her leaving, going to him. Literally, I mean, I see it so well, so I share it all the time, because it was beautiful. And she left us. And I tell people, I say that lets you know that God knows us and he knows who we are. He knew that she was family oriented. He knew that she loved her family, and he was not going to let her leave here until she saw all three of us together. And when he got in that door and he said, she left. And that was that moment in my life when my faith and my Christian growth went to a whole nother level, because I saw it. So you have to be a protector, listen to them, and you can't get back a lot of this stuff. So, you know, I tell you, spend that time. You find that time, don't find it to be inconveniencing or because you're trying to get to where you're trying to go. Take that moment and enjoy that moment.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. All right. And last but not least, Mrs. Cray.
Well, I'm basically repeating what they've said. Stand on your faith, because I can't tell you how many times we, at the end of the day, said God did it again. He gave us what we needed for this day. And then my grandmother had a saying, don't borrow trouble, just stand still in this minute.
Yes.
When you're in the presence,
Yes.
stand still in that minute. No platitudes, just listen, give time and attention. And that is a gift not just to the person who's ill, but it's a gift to the caregiver as well.
Thank you all very much. I want to thank you. We're going to move into closing remarks at this time, just to be sensitive to everyone's time. But what I heard was it is a choice. It was a privilege. It was even a blessing to serve in the capacity as caregiver. And in that role, I heard advocate, friend, nurse, chauffeur, cook, cleaner, family member, and counselor. And despite wearing all those hats, it was still seen and described as a privilege. And for that, I say thank you. I thank you on behalf of all breast cancer survivors. I thank you on behalf of your loved ones. And I thank you on behalf of the Macon, Georgia chapter of the Links Incorporated. I want to thank our audience as well for attending this panel to allow us to hear about the breast cancer journey from a caregiver's perspective. We truly appreciate your attendance. I would like to thank everyone who made this event possible. Our chapter president, Sylvia McGee, the Links in Pink Initiative committee members, and especially the education subcommittee. I want to thank Nancy Cleveland, Therese McGee, and all of our esteemed panelists. Thank you for being here, being vulnerable, and sharing your stories. I wouldn't be a part of this organization if I did not invite you all to some other upcoming events we have. We have Pink to the Polls. October 21st is Breast Cancer Survivor and Advocacy Day, but it is also a great day to get out to the polls and vote. The location is your local Board of Elections. We ask that you take a picture and post it to social media with the hashtag Pink to the Polls or Pink to the Polls-Macon. We also have upcoming, in a continuation of the Links in Pink education, mental health and mastectomies, another panel discussion regarding the impact of mastectomies on breast cancer survivors' mental health. That'll be November 17th via Zoom, very similar to this one. That's also, just so I'll take a moment so you can collect the information related to Pink to the Polls. This concludes our panel. Once again, I want to say thank you for all who participated, all who assisted, and all who attended. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.